Okay, boys and girls, this is the review for Chapter 9, World History 2, the Industrial Revolution. As you can see, we're doing a little bit different format this time. Instead of me propping up the camera or having somebody tape me, I am holding the camera. Whoa, yeah, we're going to be doing this all from my point of view as I see the board. And we're going to try and do this kind of fast because it's after school and I want to go home. But the Industrial Revolution. It began in England. It first started in England, and it starts in England because England has a lot of factors going on for it. They're going to help with the Industrial Revolution. They have lots of the two basic necessities that all countries must have to industrialize. They have lots of coal and lots of iron ore, both very necessary for industry. They were also the first original location of the steam engine and the improvement of the steam engine, which is going to power the entire Industrial Revolution. Also, they have lots of labor available, particularly after the British enclosure movement, which was forced on the people by the British Parliament. Basically, it makes farmers have to take jobs in factories and mines, kicks them off the farms, and they want to work, they want to eat, so they go work for the factories and the mines. With the Industrial Revolution, the first industries that we see with the Industrial Revolution are textile mills and steel production. Of course, after iron production, they start moving to steel production. Those are the first basic industries. We also see very quickly after countries begin to industrialize in Western Europe, industrialized countries want to control raw materials and markets, and the best places to get those kind of things, to get new raw materials to sell to people and thus have those places become markets, are Africa, Asia, and the Americas. Not so much the Americas, mostly Africa and Asia. The Monroe Doctrine helped to squash all the imperialist desires in the Americas. We have some arrows up here. The Industrial Revolution also led to the factory system. And what the factory system is, it's a system combining workers, all the raw materials they need to make their products, the machines, they're going to take those raw materials and process them into finished goods, have a work schedule set up for those workers, and a distribution network for taking all those finished goods and getting them out to the markets where they want to sell to. That's the factory system. It's the new way of mass producing goods. And what this is going to do, it is going to destroy the cottage industry. What cottage industry is, it's the old way of doing things where goods were produced in homes and private houses. You'd have a family that all they did was make textiles, a family that made shoes, a family that made iron products. And the factory system is going to crush them and their dreams. They will no longer be able to get by just on making their own things. Back over here to inventors and inventions. You have four big inventors you need to know. James Hargreaves, he invents the spinning jenny, which is going to rapidly speed up the production of textiles, cloth products. James Watt is going to be the developer of the steam engine, which is very crucial. It's going to power the entire revolution. Eli Whitney develops the cotton gin, which is used for cleaning cotton, very important with the textile industry. And for the steel producing industry, you have Henry Bessemer, who creates his steel converter. This is going to be a cheap method for taking iron and converting it into steel. Before that, they were using iron for everything. A lot less cheaper, or a lot cheaper than steel back then, but heavier and weaker than steel. So his invention is going to be crucial. With the Industrial Revolution, we see capitalism. And capitalism is going to be the economic system that is really endorsed by all the Western European countries. Capitalism, when you think of capitalism, think competition. And that competition, you have businesses competing with one another, and it helps to set prices, it helps to set wages, and it helps to set working conditions all across the economy. Capitalism, very early on, is going to be defended by the writer Adam Smith in his book Wealth of Nations. He has nothing but good things to say about capitalism, and to this day, it's still widely read as a defense of our capitalist system that most of the big chunks of the world still use today. Capitalism, what it leads to freedom, both for businesses and the workers themselves to do what they want that's going to make more money for themselves. It leads to business profits for the vast majority of businesses, if they're competitive, that is. It leads to increased standards of living, and it leads to growth in the middle class. What we also see it leads to, though, is poor working conditions. Although we did say it helps to set wages and working conditions early on, when all the factories all of them had crummy working conditions, well, it led to poor working conditions all across countries of the Industrial Revolution. It also leads to an unequal distribution of wealth. You see a very tiny percentage of extremely wealthy people, and a large portion of the populations of Western European countries were extremely poor because of capitalism. But People didn't seem to mind. An alternative to capitalism, we see socialism and communism. These develop as responses to the problems of capitalism. When you think socialism, think of an economic system where there is government or public ownership of the major industries. Communism is socialism's ugly brother. It's socialism, but instead of just controlling the major industries, the government controls the lives of the people. I think that's what that's supposed to say. And if they have to, if they need to, they will use violence on you until you do what they want you to do. When you think of communism, think of Karl Marx. He is the true developer of communism. And he develops it in two books, Das Kapital and the Communist Manifesto. Das Kapital is the economic theory of communism. It's a gigantic book, lays out how it's supposed to work. And the Communist Manifesto is the more famous document written by Marx. What it does, he's calling for worker revolts, worker uprisings to throw off the bourgeoisie. Those are the wealthy people. And the people rising up are the proletariat. The prole is supposed to fight and help to redistribute income, because that's what the core of communism is about. It's about redistributing income, and it's about creating a classless society. No social classes, no economic classes. Everybody's the same. So that's communism. Labor unions we also see during this time. What labor unions are? They are organizations of workers to try and improve the working conditions and to try and improve pay for those workers. One of the big things that labor unions can do if their demands aren't met is that they can order strikes, which means no working. We also see a lot of labor unions are busy lobbying governments. They spend a lot of money to try and influence government representation to make laws for those workers protecting those industries. So labor unions are a big deal during the Industrial Revolution as a counter to the owners and the managers of the factories and the mines. Speaking of the mines and the factories, we have the factory system. We already said that in the factory system, cottage industries simply couldn't compete. The shoe person, the shoemaker who makes a pair of shoes a week and has to sell them for a decent price because he has to live, he has to eat. He can't compete against the factory pumping out 100 shoes a day and being able to sell them for ridiculously low prices. So the cottage industry is going to go bye-bye. We also see in the factories, in those mines, you're going to find very harsh working conditions, which is partially what the labor unions are going to fight against. We also see child labor is common. Men and women are working alongside children. That's just a regular occurrence because children, you don't have to pay as much, and it can keep costs low, which can keep the prices low because it's all about competition because it's capitalism. We see the factory owners with a lot of these businesses. They are controlling the lives of their workers, and if you don't like it, that's tough. And you're going to have to deal with it because competition for jobs was incredibly fierce. It's not like you could just walk out and find another job very easily. If you hated your job, better suck it up. So those are the factory system. Oh yeah, slavery. Slavery, one of the big impacts we see with slavery during this time is the invention of the cotton gin. People get confused. The cotton gin, they think it leads to a decrease in slavery. Oh, you won't need as many slaves because you have this new device that helps to clean cotton. Wrong. The cotton gin leads to an increase in slavery. Because the cotton gin so drastically reduced the amount of time it took to clean cotton, the plantation owners, they could plant even more cotton, which led to the need for more slaves. They could clean it so much quicker. Well, why not grow more of it? So it actually led to an increase in slavery. I'll bet Eli Whitney didn't think that was going to happen. But what we also see during this time, in the 19th century, we see very powerful anti-slavery movements happen in the U.S. and Britain. And by the middle of the century, we see that both countries are going to effectively outlaw slavery. Britain is, during this time, they had relied on the United States, the southern United States, to grow most of their cotton. And of course, once their anti-slavery movement became popular, the British realized, well, we shouldn't buy our cotton from these slaveholders over to America. So they started turning to India to grow their cotton, provide for all their cotton needs. Another key portion of this chapter is imperialism. It goes hand in hand with the Industrial Revolution. With imperialism, we see the Europeans competing to control the markets and resources, particularly in Africa and Asia. Not so much in Americas, but to a lesser degree. We also see those industrially produced goods made in Europe are flooding the colonies, and it's going to destroy the local markets. They just can't survive against all the well-crafted and cheap colonial-made factory goods. And what imperialism is, basically, it's the policies of strong countries, both socio and cultural and economic and military, aimed at controlling weaker ones. There are multiple forms of imperialism. The big three are colonies, protectorates, and spheres of influence. Colonies we've seen before, they're the most common. It is land fully controlled by another nation. Protectorates, you see the land being controlled, but it's not directly ruled. Usually the European power has some kind of interest in the country but doesn't want to take control of everything. Great example was Egypt. Egypt was a protectorate of Britain. The British didn't want to control all of Egypt. The only thing they really cared about was the Suez Canal. You remember they were a sea power, and they had to make sure that they had control of the seas and important waterways. And you could call the Suez Canal that, connecting the Mediterranean to the Red Sea, one of the most important choke points in the world. The third form of imperialism, spheres of influence. That's a territory where the trade, the economy is controlled by a foreign power. And these are most famous in China. China was chopped up into spheres of influence by several of the European powers: the British, the French, the Germans, the Dutch, and the Russians. So they were all involved in China. With imperialism, we see it's motivated by nationalism. All the countries want to have the biggest and the best, the most powerful empire, so they're all getting involved and busy divvying up Asia and Africa. We're going to see in future chapters that imperialism is going to lead to conflicts. Well, the conflicts in Europe are going to spill over to the colonies. We're going to see that with World War I, World War II. The conflicts, the fighting doesn't just stay in Europe. It quickly goes to the colonial possessions of those European countries. In the colonies, we also see missionaries are common. Christianity is being spread around the world at this point thanks to those Christian missionaries. India, one of the biggest countries, of course, we also talked about China. India during this time is becoming controlled by the British Empire. And when I say controlled, it's not directly controlled by the British government. At first, it's controlled by the East India Company. They're allowed to control vast sections of India. During this time, Japan is no longer isolationist. They are forced open by an American fleet that sails into Japan and says, basically, you're going to trade or we're going to start opening fire. And the Japanese quickly agreed. We also see responses to imperialism happening. Typically, they are arranged into two groups: armed conflicts, and we see nationalism developing in these colonies. Armed conflicts, the biggest example for the SOLs and for this chapter and for the test is the Boxer Rebellion in China, where the Chinese were fighting against the spheres of influence that were controlling their lives and what they bought and what they sold. We also see the development of nationalism in the colonies. This is not something that's just purely for Europeans and the European powers. The colonies are developing their own sense of nationalism. They want home rule. They want to control themselves. And a great example of that developing during the age of imperialism and the Industrial Revolution is the rise of the Indian National Congress Party in India. And they are one of the first groups to demand independence for India. We're going to see that claim growing and growing over time until they finally gain independence after World War II. But this is Chapter 9. There's all of it. There's a bunch. So please make sure you study tonight, and I'll see you tomorrow.